I'm going to open up this snowy house camera raw file. It's in NEF, which is the raw format of Nikon cameras. Each camera vendor will have its own camera raw format. So since it was shot in RAW, when I double-click, it opens the raw dialog in Photoshop. And if I get a little hazard or warning, it might mean that I had looked at this originally in an earlier version of Photoshop. But now that that's gone, or there's no exclamation mark, I know that I'm using the new Camera Raw 7 included with PhotoshopCS6. The first thing we're going to do is really punch this too far so we have clear lines to paint on. So I will push the contrast hard right, creating a really artificial look to this image. I'll also boost the clarity hard right, which is mid-tone contrast. This gives me a super contrasty photo, almost looking like a special effect in and of itself. If I want richer colors, I can boost the vibrance, which is more subtle amounts of saturation, intelligent saturation, not just punching all the numbers. So if I were to double-click this dial and set it back to 0, watch the yellow and blue here, or even the building itself, it picks up a little blue as I dial that up. And if I turn preview off and on, you can really see how I went towards a special effect with this. Camera Raw offers the ability to save snapshots so that I can have several different images saved for different intended uses. So I'll save this as color punched because I'm punching up the color and the contrast. Now I'll go back and I want to create a black and white version of this. So to do that, I'll rip out all the color by sliding saturation down. And here I might want to focus a little bit more on the shadow and highlight detail, so I can play with shadows, and I can push the whites too far. Since I'm going to be painting directly on this image, I'm not worried about pushing the whites to a 0% value, because this isn't going to be printed as a photograph. We're really going to use some of Adobe Photoshop's brushes on it to create a special effect. So now I'll go back to snapshots. I'll make a new snapshot and call it black and white to paint. And there we have it. So now I'll leave it on that snapshot, but I could flip back and forth between them. You could do several different corrections. In fact, one last one I'll do. I love clarity for an ethereal glow. If I slide clarity all the way to the left, it just gives this ghosted, soft look and feel to the image. And I might also want to play with the shadows and the highlights on that. Once I'm done, I'll click Snapshots, make another new snapshot and call it Glow. But I'm going to go to the Color Punched and hit Open Image. So whichever one you leave it on will be the one you opened, as if you shot it with all of those settings on. I'll double-click to collapse Mini Bridge and hit Command 0 or Control 0 to fit in window. And now I will go underneath the brush tool. I can right-click or click and hold for 2 seconds and choose the Mixer Brush tool. And if I look at the built-in brushes, there are a few that actually let you paint with a mouse more like painting with a tablet. So if I choose one like this new soft round left hand pose or soft round right hand pose, it's as if the brush is angled to the left or to the right. I'll hit my right bracket key on my keyboard and I'm going to hold down Option and click to load this part of the photo as the source for the paint. I'm hitting Command plus or Control plus to zoom in, and I'll use my left bracket next to the letter P on my keyboard to make my brush size smaller. And now I'm painting over top of this original photo to make it my own artwork. I'll flip the brush style to the left-handed pose, and then you'll see the brush goes in a different direction. And now it's still painting the yellow, so I'm going to undo and Option click or Alt click to grab the blue as the paint source. And you could see how you could proceed all the way through this to make a hand-done painting from an interesting photograph. In fact, there are collections of new brushes that have been added, like the round watercolor brush. If I go to round watercolor and I Option or Alt click on the window and make my brush a little bit bigger, here with watercolors, as I zoom in, it tends to saturate a lot more of the pigment or the watercolor ink towards the edges. But I'm using my original source photo as my starting point to paint in each of these windows. And I'm not going to have you guys watch me all the way through, but this is how I would approach realistic artwork. In fact, I could have done this all on a new layer to preserve the original if I ever go too far. But I've really made a drawing out of this window. I see a couple parts that I've missed, so I will Option click or Alt click to load the blue, that part of the window, and paint a little bit more. And I'm even doing some zigzag patterns. If you look at your brushes panel, I will go to Window and Brush. Every one of these new brushes has its own setting, and it shows you a complete brush stroke. In fact, these are erodible tips, like real charcoal. If I were to Option click or Alt click to load this fence on the roof and paint, I could paint several times and the tip is really wearing down. If you want to make it look as if you've just sharpened the tip, all you do is hit Sharpen Tip. And now you get a finer edge when you first start doing your paint. As it erodes, it's really going to paint a little bit wider, like the point of a pencil or piece of charcoal wearing down. So as I look at every one of these new brushes, I've just gone to the size 50 watercolor buildup, or I have a watercolor wash, and here's a very interesting spray pattern where you could see how it's got spacing, granularity, spatter, and I'll hold down Option or Alt to click and reload it, but you can get some very interesting effects with each one of these. I could play with the distortion. I could space this out further by dialing spacing up, and you get a preview of really what it's doing, those halos that watercolors make. In fact, I could switch the brushes directly in the panel, and you could look at a few of the other new ones, like airbrush being on. Airbrush used to be an option just like it was in the panel, but now there's an included 71 pixel airbrush style. So as I click and drag to hold, it's going to build up more ink in that individual area, as if it's spraying. So I'm clicking and holding and just spraying in a circular pattern. And we'll give it a few seconds to catch up because this is a very large file. In fact, if you don't have a lot of RAM or a fast computer, you may want to res this down before you start painting. But I could try a few of the other ones that are now included and built in, and just pause for 2 seconds and it tells you what each one of these will do. So here's one of the erodible points. You could set up a size, how soft it is, and whether it's pointed, flat, round, square, triangle, or even build your own custom one. So although I'm not going to perfect this artwork, I really love what I've done on that window, and you could take some time. It takes me an hour or two to finish one of these. Take some time and paint in this entire photograph to turn a picture into your own masterpiece, and explore all the new brushes that are available in PhotoshopCS6. The mixer brush was added in PhotoshopCS5, and some of those original tips are still there. But in CS6, they've added the watercolors, the charcoal, the erodible tips. Good luck, and happy painting!